We're very glad that you have joined us for this special episode of the Biblically Grounded Video Podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Van Huss. Obviously, things are getting a little festive in here because it's the month of December and we're going to be talking about Christmas. And my guest today, when it comes to Christmas and archaeology, I think he's got a lot to say, and I think he's pretty awesome. He is my very good friend, Dr. Gary Byers. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thanks, man. I didn't have an ugly Christmas sweater, which you said I should try to find. So last year I was in Hawaii for Christmas. And so I'm wearing my Hawaiian Christmas, my anti-ugly Christmas sweater, because I'm in the tropics while you are freezing there in your Christmas sweater.
That's right. Well, mele kalikimaka, right?
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, Gary, it is great to have you here. And so just for our viewers, I want to give them a little bit of our personal background, our story together. So, Gary, we first met several years ago on my first dig at Shiloh. So Dr. Byers is the co-director of the dig at Shiloh under Associates for Biblical Research. And we met kind of before the dig, touring around and looking at sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really something. And I knew while we were on the bus talking, while we were going around from site to site looking at things, I knew that we were going to get along fine.
And we have. It's been fun.
We have. So, Gary, what special thing did you do this summer for me?
Well, I went to Shiloh to do our excavation, and I had a special assignment while we were there, and it had been planned in advance, although it wasn't without hiccups. But I had the privilege of officiating at your wedding with your wife, who and I just love saying Mrs. Van Huss. I just love that. I will call Abigail to her face on occasion, but I just have great joy in saying Mrs. Van Huss to her. And so it was my privilege to officiate at your wedding there at Shiloh at about 6:30 in the morning. And you two spirited off for your honeymoon while the rest of us, and everybody, we were in our dig clothes, so the rest of us went back to work.
Yeah, we did kind of ditch you guys to work without us that day, didn't we?
You did, but you came back the next week and helped.
That's true. And it looks like you guys held the dig together while we were gone. I mean, we came back and there were no problems.
It wasn't easy, but we managed.
Well, Gary, it is so great to have you here. Now, you've been an archaeologist for a while now, and I was talking to a mutual friend of ours on this program, Brian Wendell, and we were talking about pastors who become archaeologists. And so he name dropped you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into biblical archaeology? Tell us about your background.
Yeah, sure. I grew up, my dad taught me American history, and I was just an American history buff. I just loved history. I became a believer in my first year of college, and my love and interest in history got transferred so quickly to the biblical world. It was, I don't know, it just happened. I had a pastor who had traveled to the Holy Land a number of times. And then in my second year of college, I was in the founding class of what was then Lynchburg Baptist College, now Liberty University. And the first 100 students that enrolled got a free trip to the Holy Land. And I'm not going to say that was the reason I went there, because I don't think it was exactly, but it sure didn't hurt. And so with my first trip to the Holy Land, 1972, I fell in love with that place. I graduated from Liberty after my third year there, my senior year, after transferring there. And I started a church even before I graduated. So I pastored that church for 18 years in Frederick, Maryland. And in that process, my love for the Bible and then my appreciation for archaeology just grew. And in the end, it was time after 18 years to leave there, and I began working in archaeology shortly after I started with ABR then. And so ABR and I have been excavating in the Holy Land since 1993.
Wow. 1993. So you mentioned ABR, and I think most of our people are aware that that's Associates for Biblical Research. Can
Yes.
you tell us a bit about them and your work with them, and then the digs you did with them?
Yes. Well, so ABR has been around, founded by Dr. David Livingston, looking for the city of Ai in the West Bank in north of Jerusalem, and they were founded because he went to school there in Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Let's see, Hebrew. I can't remember the name now. Well, it was they've changed the name recently in the last decade. But anyway, he was there, and a visiting professor, said there was no evidence for the city of Ai in Joshua's day, and he just made a note of that and said, "I don't believe that. The Bible's clear about the city of Ai, and so I am certain that it was there. We just need to find it." And he started, finished his schooling, got his degree, and started looking for the city of Ai. And I joined the Ai excavation in 1993 and 4. And then in 1995, we started the Kirbet el-Makadar excavation, looking for Ai. And I think we probably found Ai. And so that I did that with Dr. Bryant Wood for about a decade. And then after even Brian stepped away, I worked with Scott there, continuing in the site.
Yeah. So now the city there at Kirbet el-Makadar, the publication Volume 2 has recently been published, which is
Yes,
the New Testament era.
yes, yes.
Okay. And so we're still waiting on Volume 1, right?
Yes, Dr. Bryant Wood is finishing that one up, and we're praying that Brian's getting old, and we're praying he gets it finalized. I've been working with him on it, and we're as far as I can tell, we're done. But he's still tweaking stuff, and he's an engineer. That's what they do.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, the important thing is the thorough work.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely right.
that's the thing I've found with my time with ABR is very meticulous, very thorough, because we're believers, we're
Yeah,
Christians, and so it's like your colleague Dr. Scott Stripling says that if an archaeologist makes a mistake, okay, they made a mistake, but if an evangelical archaeologist makes a mistake, then it hurts your reputation, you get in trouble. So it's important to
yes,
have that meticulous work.
yeah.
So currently, you are the co-director at the dig at Tel Shiloh or Biblical Shiloh.
Yes, and I've been 16 years assistant director at Tal el-Hammam excavation in Jordan, and then I also dug at Tel Ekron, biblical city. We believe it's the biblical city, Ekron of the Philistines, and that was my very first excavation back in the 1980s. So all those two with ABR, three with ABR, one with my university, Trinity Southwest University, and then one way back in my days of my graduate school at Baltimore Hebrew University at Ekron.
Okay, so you've been digging for a long time, some interesting sites. You and I might have to get together and talk about Philistines at some point.
I love them Philistines.
Good. So you mentioned Trinity Southwest, where you are now. What's your position at Trinity Southwest, and what do they do archaeologically?
Yeah. Dean of the College of Archaeology and Biblical History. We have a sister university, which is Veritas International University, and I'm a professor there. We actually run, it's kind of a little weird deal, but we run the two schools concurrently as far as archaeology and biblical history. And so we have graduate students, but we also can accommodate undergrads who are finishing their undergrad work and then joining the graduate programs. And so that's what I'm doing here in Albuquerque. I officially am in retirement, but I retired to do this stuff, and this is what I love.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is great, and you're good at it.
Thank you.
Um, I love working with you, Gary. So you mentioned that you worked with the Tal el-Hammam excavation, which
Yes,
that is in conjunction with Trinity and Veritas, correct?
yes, both schools sponsor the dig.
Okay, and so for those who don't know about Tal el-Hammam, there are a lot of, I mean, there's some controversial things going on here. What are some of the thoughts or claims about what that site might be?
Well, Tal el-Hammam is about 8 miles northeast of the Dead Sea, about 8 miles east of the Jordan River, right on the eastern edge of the Jordan River Valley. And the working hypothesis is that that is the site of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a very large site, goes back to the very earliest cities in the region based on archaeological evidence. The Bible puts Sodom in Genesis chapter 10, the beginning, the table of nations. And so, that seems to fit. And we got stuff, interesting stuff. Seem potentially, depending on how you view Genesis 13, the right place, maybe the right time, and the right kind of stuff, a destruction that seems to have come from an airburst event, a celestial event from the sky, if you would, fire and brimstone from the sky, destroyed that city. And so that's the working hypothesis. And we were not in the field this year for the first time. We missed 2 years with COVID, but we aren't in the field right now, and we're actually starting the publication process. And we'll continue to put our information out there, and we'll, like with our e-ball tablet, you put the information out there, and everybody gets a chance to say what they think. And
That's
so
right.
we're in that process.
Yeah, no, that is great. So we are moving on from some cursed tablets and the city of Sodom. We are going to move on now to something a bit more festive, a bit more
Festive.
joyful. We want to bring joy to the world, right? So
Yep. The Lord has come.
so to begin our talk on Christmas, and by the way, this is just to let our listeners, our viewers know. So for the whole month of December this year, we're going to be talking about Christmas and Hanukkah. So we have planned for this year, the first 2 weeks here in December, we have planned the Archaeology of Christmas with Dr. Byers. And then for the third week in December, we want to talk about the two miracles of Hanukkah with Larry Stamm. And then Christmas Day, because our podcast is released on Wednesdays, and this year Christmas is Wednesday, we want to wrap up with a third episode on Christmas again with Dr. Byers. So get ready just to learn all that you ever wanted to know about the archaeology of Christmas.
So do I have to wear my Christmas Hawaiian outfit for all of them?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I shall.
No, it's going to be great. Also, I'm trying to coerce Dr. Byers into doing a documentary film about how archaeology ruins Christmas
Yes.
because it's so much fun. Okay. All
We'll
right.
get into a little bit of it in these next couple episodes, I reckon.
We will. Some of what we're going to talk about will challenge our view of the Christmas story. We make assumptions. We read the Bible, and the Bible tells us what happened. And then we get traditions. We hear stories. We see movies. We see picture books as kids, and we get all these ideas in our head of what the first Christmas was. And maybe sometimes we miss out on the actual events, what really transpired, and what the Bible teaches us. So, buckle up because this is going to be fun. Gary, can we start by talking about some of the people involved in the Christmas story, or even peripheral? I'm
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about the political situation at this time in Israel, or Judea as it was known. It was a Roman province. And so let's talk about the Roman emperor. Let's talk about Augustus, okay? Because the Bible tells us that's when this happened, is when Augustus was emperor. Who was Emperor Augustus?
Yeah, I like to call him one of the air quotes important people in the Christmas story, because he's mentioned as we start Luke chapter 2 verse 1, where the Christmas story starts in Luke. He's right up from the front. He's the emperor of the Roman Empire. He's actually technically the first emperor. When he became emperor in 27 BC, he he sort of he presented himself to the Roman Senate, already a very powerful man, and the stepson,
Mhm.
the adopted son, and the heir in Julius Caesar's will to follow, to receive everything he had, and he was already a political figure, a military man, and he sort of presented himself to the Roman Senate and said, "I'm your guy."
Yeah,
And so they elected him as the leader. Julius Caesar was really a dictator. He wasn't truly an emperor. He becomes the first emperor of the Roman Empire in 27 BC, and he goes all the way through AD 14. So he
yeah.
was
So he was born Gaius Octavius, but
yes,
he was presented emperor as Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So he's coming in as the great nephew of Julius Caesar, and he's a pretty powerful guy.
Very powerful. And after his death, they deified him, and after that, they did that with all the emperors. He just set the tone and considered himself a god anyway. By the time he was done ruling by 14 AD, and so he set the tone for the Roman Empire, for emperors for centuries to come.
Yeah. Yeah, and he ruled during a very interesting time in Roman history during the Pax Romana, which I think was also called the Pax Augustus or Augusta.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
And so
and
what was that?
he was the guy. Well, Pax is peace, the peace of Rome, and during his period, he was an administrator. He was a guy of vision, and he really moved Roman roads. Had Roman where the Roman army traveled, they fought, but they also did construction projects. They would build roads, they would build forts, they would do anything. They were an amazing military machine that was equipped to do anything and everything, and they did it. And at the far eastern end of the Roman Empire, Judea, Syria, and to the eastern edge of that, Jordan, that was where one of Caesar Augustus' buddies came into picture, and that was Herod, who was named King of the Jews in 40 BC by the Roman Senate, and he was approved by Augustus Octavius at the time. So he was part of all that.
Yeah,
They
and he
began.
was he was very sly about being able to keep his kingship, was he not? Because he had supported Mark Antony during the Civil War, and when Mark Antony was killed, what he ran straight to Augustus, and what did he do? Like throw himself at his mercy?
Well, yeah, what he did was he'd been a loyal supporter of Antony, and when Augustus Octavius beat him, he went right to him and said, "Look, I supported Anthony. It's no question about it. I was loyal to Anthony to the end. You won. I can be loyal to you to the end. You know my loyalty is real. I'm talented. I work hard. I will be loyal to you as I was to Anthony." And Augustus was a smart guy, and he said, "Yeah, I can work with you. I can work with that." And so he was quite a supporter on the eastern edge of the empire, and really helped build that Pax Romana in the Eastern Empire. And they became close. Herod's family lived in Rome for a good bit of time. His son studied in Rome, grew up with the next couple of Roman emperors who were part of Augustus's family. In the Roman world, you may or may not be biologically linked, but you could be adopted and become the heir to, and that's what they did. They may have been biologically connected in a distant way, but they were adopted in officially and became the heir. And so Herod's kids grew up with Augustus's kids and grandkids.
Wow. And so Herod himself, he came from someone, Antipater was his father, and they were not from what we call Israel today or Judea. They were from another country nearby, were they not?
Yeah. They from the country of Edom, which by New Testament times is called Idumea. And so he was an Idumean, his father, and they were conquered by the Jews early on. And when they got the chance, when Antipater got the chance, he went after, he threw off Jewish control, and they wound up getting control, a ruling class over the Jews with the Romans. And so he married a Jewish woman, and that made him sort of Jewish. He never really got into it at all, but he would profess enough that he was passable as far as the Romans concerned. He was fine. The strict Orthodox Hasidim Jews never bought into him. I never appreciated him. It was always a challenge to him. And Herod built palace forts all over the region.
Yeah, he was known as Herod the Great, and part of his greatness came from those building projects. And Gary, you and I have visited several of those building projects together. Tell us a little bit about some of the things he did that made him Herod the Great.
Yeah, he was Herod the Great builder, Herod the Great administrator, Herod the Great manipulator, but he was not Herod of great character. By the time he was done, he offed wives, he offed his sons, he offed his friends, he offed his enemies. He was just a nasty piece of work as far as his character, but he was a genius when it came to getting control, defeating armies, even as a general in his early days. That's how he became famous with the Romans. So he was quite a man, but not a man of good character. And he's one of those important people of the Christmas story in air quotes, because he was important for the story, but he was not a good man and not good for the story. God worked around him, not through him.
Right, and we certainly want to talk about the villainy that's presented about Herod. And I think in our third episode, the episode that will air on Christmas Day, I believe. So that's going to be exciting. So you definitely want to see that. So he's got these building projects, and he's building palaces at places like Masada, Jericho, out across in Jordan, Macros, places like that. Yep. But his most famous building project of all was a renovation of the Temple Mount, correct?
Yes. Yeah. That was his doing. He thought it would make the Jews appreciate him more, and I guess to a level there was some of that. But he built a building that Josephus even said was just one of the great buildings of the ancient world. It probably could have made the list of the great seven wonders of the ancient world, which were basic. Most of them were wonders from the Greco-Roman period, and it was an incredible structure. Not just the temple building, but the whole Temple Mount complex was amazing.
Right. There's an entire complex. In fact, recently I talked with Frankie Snyder about the floor tiles of the Temple Mount.
Yes.
Yeah, a whole episode. She showed us his tiles. that are his signature. You showed me in Israel the blocks of stone that he would cut that had a beveled edge that
Yes.
are signature Herodian building
Yes.
blocks.
Yep.
And his architecture, he did well. I mean, he built cities. Think of Caesarea Maritima, a port city that Paul went in and out of. Our first Gentile convert, Cornelius,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
there. So many biblical things happened. So Herod the Great, his fingerprints for such an evil guy, his fingerprints are all over the New Testament.
Yeah. Yeah. And he ruled Judea for 36 years. His sons and grandsons ruled. So they uh, up until 70 AD, he had family line ruling in the region. After that, it was over. But they ruled in that region for over 100 years. Him and his descendants.
Hmm. That is that's quite a role for someone who was that sly and that underhanded, and so many things that he did that were dangerous to others, and yet he has a rule that long. In fact, we and again something we'll talk about in another episode. When the family, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, fled to get away, and the angel warned them, and then came back and told them he's dead now. You can come back. Quite a
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
So another government official from this time period that we read about, Luke has some things to say about him, and that is Quirinius. Luke talks about the census of Quirinius. He was he was an aristocrat, a Roman aristocrat from kind of a minor family. So his name was Publius Sulpicius Quirinius. And we just call it
That's right.
Quirinius.
Fun of me
Right?
to say it right too. Good.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to that would really weight down the story to put that whole name in there. But what so this is one of those names we read in the Bible and we just skim over it. But it's actually pretty important to understand the context of the birth of Jesus if we
Yeah.
can understand the historicity of these characters. Who was
Yeah.
Quirinius?
Yeah. Well, he was, as you said, he was a Roman of a patrician family. He was a military, actually led the Roman army in defeating an army there in Syria. So he early gets connected with Syria early in his career. In fact, that happened about 12 BC. His name Quirinius is his Latin name. Quirinius is how it's done in the King James Bible, and some Bibles use his Latin name, some use his Greek name. Either way, it's this. We're talking about the same guy. He's called in the text. Now, I list him with one of my other air quotes, important people of the Christmas story. When Luke tells the story, he talks about Caesar Augustus and Quirinius, and then he tells the story. When Matthew tells the story, he doesn't mention them. He talks about Herod and the chief priests and the teachers of the law. So those are the important people in the Christmas story. And of course, we're going to talk about some of the not important people who really were important people in the Christmas story later on. So Quirinius was connected with Syria as early as 12 BC. We date the death of Herod 4 BC, but it's not clear. It's just not settled in anybody who says they know. They think they know. We just don't know.
Yeah, and we run across a lot of that in the world of biblical archaeology. There's a whole lot of I know.
Yes.
Okay, well, other people know other things that contradict what you know. And what we have are the things that we're given in Scripture, And then the things that we find in history and in the material leftovers of history and archaeology that help to illuminate the text of Scripture. And so Quirinius, we've got some archaeological evidence of him, but we also have so he's controversial, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So there are a lot of people who say, well, because he had a famous census that happened, I think, in AD 6, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken. And that's
yes.
after the
That
death
one
of
is
Herod.
that was well recorded. Yeah, after Herod, after Archelaus.
Yeah. So then people look and they say, well, Luke is wrong because he says it was during the time of Herod, and it's also Quirinius's census is given, and these don't match. However, we do find so he was the legate, the military governor of Syria, which included Judea, correct?
Um, in the early days, it did not until after Herod died. Herod's son Archelaus was deposed by the Roman Emperor Augustus himself. Then Quirinius came in and had Syria, which Palestine became part of that. It wasn't Judea anymore. It was Palestina.
Interesting. Now, okay, I was not aware of that. What I did understand is that before he was the governor of Syria, that he had been involved in military actions there and was one of the high-ranking officers, one of the generals, and that in the governance of the territory, that while he wasn't over domestic issues, that he did deal with foreign issues, which then would have included Judea, I guess, at
Yes.
least the neighbors there. So is this the era we're looking at where maybe the census that Luke is talking about? Because he says the first census, right?
Like there was a second one in AD 6, which Luke knew about too.
Yeah. So there's more than one census. So to say, well, Quirinius, the Bible's getting it wrong here. It's got an anachronism because Quirinius didn't do his census until AD 6. Well, Luke says it's the first census that he took, and he doesn't say that he was the governor. He was helping to go. He was governing. So what kind of situation are we looking at then at the time of the birth of Jesus before Herod dies?
What we the facts are, he is well known in Roman inscriptions. He's well known. He is well connected with Syria beginning in 12 BC, but the events of his life between 12 BC and 6 AD are just not at all clear. We do not have inscriptions that make it clear what happened during that time. So during this important time when Jesus was born, we at this point we don't have any inscriptions that can say specifically. We just know he had a long history with Syria, and so this particular census he was involved in, having some kind of leadership in. We don't know that he was governor at all. He could have been, but we don't know that at all. So it is what we know from history is not at all inconsistent with a census sometime between 12 BC and 6 AD. And of course, we would put that around 4 BC probably. So there's just nothing wrong. There's no reason to throw up any red flags. And anybody that does is just looking to pick a fight because, they don't want it to be. And so thus it isn't. Just
Right.
like,
And to say that, well, Luke is wrong because we don't know of a census, that's an argument from silence, is it not?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely right.
So
Okay. We can get crazy on either side. Absolutely, this is the way it is, or it isn't. And either way, we need to be careful.
And as archaeologists, that's what we need to be doing is looking at the material culture and interpreting, and seeing where things line up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. So, okay. So people might have a question. What is a census? What was Quirinius doing? I know that the definition can vary a bit, but why did Joseph have to go to Bethlehem? What is this?
Yeah, this, and of course, it said the whole world, and of course, the whole world would be limited to the Roman Empire at that time, and uh, but maybe even just in certain regions, whatever. But it was a census where you needed to be back with your family. Your family line needed to be connected. It doesn't say, the Greek text doesn't say anything about taxes, even though I think the King James version does. Went to be taxed, I think is the text. There's nothing about taxes. Full well, when it's all over with, every census, when it's all done, they're going to make sure they get their taxes from you now that they know you are there for sure. But there's no indication that taxes were collected during this census. The Greek New Testament word is simply enrollment. It's used about 4 times in the text. They were just tracking who was there and probably where they were living, where Mary and Joseph may have said, we live in Nazareth. They may not have. We don't know what they were thinking, because they never got back up there for a long time. They didn't get there.
Right. So the word apographe, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
simply is to enroll, to
Yes.
be listed. And we see this in the Roman Empire, do we not? That they want to know, who's where, that they're all about order and setting things, keeping people on lists and that sort of thing, correct?
Yes. Yes. And could be conscription for military service or public works, whatever.
Okay, well that's interesting, because I was reading recently about numbering the people in the Old Testament. Now we're looking at Hebrew words, but numbering, like when David is basically taking a census, that it
Yes.
could be mustering.
Yes.
Yeah, it's bringing people together. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we have then a historical emperor, we have a historical king, we have an historical governor, and so now we have the Bible tells us a town and a lineage. And you and I have been to this town, Gary, I don't know, multiple times.
Yes.
It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure to do that. But the town, of course, of Bethlehem.
In fact, the last time you and I were there, we were at the top of a hotel in downtown Bethlehem. And the hotel, from where we were overlooking Manger Square, which is where the Church of the Nativity is located. And then off in the distance, we could see Herodium, one of the palace fortresses that Herod built for himself, and where Josephus says he was buried after he died, and where I think, although everybody doesn't agree, this is archaeology and history, what do you expect? I think Ehud Netzer, the Israeli archaeologist, found the tomb of Herod the Great right
Yeah,
there, just as Josephus said. And we sat
right.
up there and looked down on all that stuff. That was a special moment.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about Herod and Herodium in a episode upcoming, because I think there are some cool things that tie in. But yeah, what an opportunity to stand there and to look out and to see, just in our line of sight, right in front of us, is the Church of the Nativity, the place where tradition says Jesus was born. And then right past it, off in the distance, is this old hollowed out volcano, this imposing Mount Doom sort of thing looking
Yeah.
over the city. And it really gives you some thoughts about Christmas. And I do want to save that for our third episode, but let's talk about Bethlehem, because this is really interesting. I know that Bethlehem is believed to have first been mentioned in the Amarna letters in the 14th century BC. So somewhere in the 1350s, 1340s, somewhere in there. that this town of Bethlehem, or we call it the house of bread. I've read that maybe it was originally the house or temple of a Canaanite god who was based on a Mesopotamian god, but I cannot find anything on the Canaanites and this god in particular. So we have a lot of tradition, but that name, the Hebrew name that we use, is Bethlehem, house of bread. Why is that significant in the story of the birth of the Messiah?
Well, yeah, that's the name of the city in the Old Testament times, and of course, in Old Testament times, it became the city of David. That was where David was born. That's where David grew up. That's where David's family lived, and that's why when Joseph was a descendant of David, needed to go for the enrollment, he went to Bethlehem because that was the family city. The where you and I were actually standing at the top of that hotel, you and not yet Mrs. Van Huss, just a little before, like a week before, and my wife, we were all standing up there looking down over. We were sort of northwest of the Manger Square, and Manger Square is probably the western edge of the Iron Age tell where David grew up. So the Iron Age city would have been where Manger Square was, and then farther to the east. And it's sort of on a ridge, and it drops off. So it's up there on that ridge. No doubt there was a city wall there for the city. The Bible talks about the gate of the city. So if there's a gate, there's a wall. So it was the city where David was born. But by Jesus' day, it was not a significant place. It was a bit off the beaten path. It wasn't a really important location. And the city of David by Jesus' day, it was Bethlehem, but it wasn't a place anybody went, except if you had to go for the census.
So Bethlehem, now there is a little bit of, not a whole lot. I think most scholars totally agree that the Bethlehem we know near Jerusalem is the Bethlehem of the Bible. Micah, the prophet Micah, said that Jesus would be born, or that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah. What is that? What is Bethlehem Ephrathah?
Yeah, so of course, Bethlehem, you said it's the house of bread in Hebrew, Bethlehem. And then Ephrathah, it's the Hebrew word for fruit or fruitful. So even the word, the Euphrates River, the Hebrew word for Euphrates is parat. And that's the Ephrathah, that's the farat, Ephrathah. So that's the word for fruitful. So that word is also used up in north of Jerusalem in the region of Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. And so there is a tradition that the tomb of Rachel is not down in Bethlehem, which there's a much more modern structure, maybe 100 years old, maybe 150 years old, that's called the tomb, Rachel's tomb, outside of Bethlehem. It's been suggested that maybe this Ephrathah could be the Parat Valley, about 6 or 7 miles north of the old city of Jerusalem, in the region of Bethlehem, in the region of Benjamin near Ramah. So I actually like that being the place where she died. I don't think there's doesn't matter to me where she was buried. And I don't think that structure there near Bethlehem in Judea, I don't think, there's no reason to believe that's the tradition, that's the right place. It's a traditional place, but we have no idea if that's the right place.
Yeah, and that's interesting. There's a rock not far from there, correct? We drive past
Yes.
when we go to our dig.
In Benjamin, the site in Benjamin, the Parat Valley. Yeah, and that the tradition is, And I got to visit that rock when before road improvements.
Yeah.
It's just hard for me to believe. Road improvements, they chipped that rock away.
Yeah.
But I was there in the days when it was whole. And the tradition is that always, doesn't matter what time of the day, you can always find shade under that rock. And I don't know, maybe there's a moment in the sunrise early in the morning, but the way it sits, it was almost just about all the time there was shade under that rock. And the tradition is that that's where she stopped, rested, and died there. And in that area, there's stone monuments that have been suggested to be the tombs of the 12 sons of Israel, and that area is called by the Arabs even the tombs of the sons of, that's what's called, the tombs of the sons of Israel. And so there's a nice tradition there about the death of Rachel in that area. I like the idea. I like the kind of off the road, off the tourist map idea of all that, but we don't know.
Yeah.
I think Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, the place that we all talk about. I think he was born there. Exactly how that connects with everything else, I don't know.
Right. So we see there the ancestors, the human ancestors of Jesus being in this area, in this land. And of course, you've already mentioned that it was the city where David came from. And we can go back to the book of Ruth and we can read about Bethlehem. Naomi came back with Ruth from Moab to there, and Boaz lived there. And then, so the line of David, that's kind of where we pick that up.
Yes.
Can you expound on that?
Yeah, sure. So when we get to the New Testament, we have the line of Jesus in Luke chapter 3, and we have the line of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. And when you go down through them, from the early on, it's they're talking about the same people. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the kingdom of Judea, names change. And so what has happened? Well, there's two different lines that pick up at that point, and they go to two different people, both cases ending with Jesus. Well, one of them ends as the family line of Mary in Luke, and the other ends as the family line of Jesus in Matthew. And so Luke, who did special research, he says when he starts the book, I'm doing special research here. I've interviewed people. I found all this stuff out. And Luke talks a lot about the ladies in Jesus' life. All the way through Luke, he constantly references women that we don't hear about elsewhere. While Matthew is focusing on Jesus' line as a king in the kingly line of David. Well, it turns out what we've got, I said it was at the end of the kingdom. It wasn't at the end of the kingdom, my bad. When we get to David's sons, they divide up. And one follows the line of the kings through David. The other follows the line of non-kings through David. Mary comes through the non-king line. Jesus has the biological genes of David by way of his mother Mary, but he has the legal right to rule on the throne through David's other son Solomon. Jesus comes through that line as well. So Jesus, in the line of Solomon, has the legal right to be on the throne. Through the line of Mary, has the biological right to be on the throne. That's just amazing that God worked all this stuff out. And I'm not sure when scholars or the people realized that this was the case. Maybe not till the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke were all done and out there and available did people begin to put two and two together and realize how God just did a great thing. And by the way, if Mary had the genes of Jesus, so then the question is, Clayton, did God implant 46 chromosomes, all that Jesus needed, or did he only implant 23 because Joe didn't give any? So Mary had 23, and then God gave another 23, and that's how it worked. I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade, but it's an interesting thing to consider. But Jesus came from the line of Mary, who came from the line of David, and Jesus was the stepson of Joseph, not the biological son of Joseph, but he was the stepson through the line of the kings. He should have been king on the throne in Jerusalem. And that's what the wise guys thought when they showed up after Jesus' birth.
Wow. This is really interesting. So what we've done is we've now set the stage politically, geographically. We've narrowed our focus down to this one particular place in this one particular time. And so now we have a stage that is set for our play. You got to think of it theatrically, right? So you come down to that. That's where we're going to leave this episode off, because we're going to pick up there for next week's episode. But Gary, before we go, could you tell us just a little bit about how we can find out more about you and your work, either with ABR or with Trinity or Veritas?
Well, yeah, a lot of my stuff is on the ABR website. So you can find stuff that I've written and done there, and I continue to do stuff with them. I'm also got a lot of stuff out with the Tall el-Hammam excavation project, and so there's I guess if you want to get in touch with me, you can do so through ABR, Associates for Biblical Research. Contact them. Look me up on the website. You can contact me through Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or the Tall el-Hammam excavation project. And that's me. That's where I am and what I do.
Oh, that's great.
I give you an email address if somebody really wants to communicate with me. Do you want that?
Oh, that's up to you.
Okay. Well, if you want it, we can put it up on the screen somewhere. But
yeah, if you're comfortable with that.
Sure. GBYERS, Gary Byers, GBYERS at TSU, Trinity Southwest University, TSU edu.us. So if you want to talk to me about anything, you want to challenge me, question me, I'd be glad to talk to you. I'm just not a great debater. I'm not interested in debating and arguing over this stuff, but I'll be glad to hear what you say. I'll be glad to think about what you're talking about, and we can have any kind of discussion you want. Or if you want to know something about some Bible training or whatever, be glad to help you find a place to help you learn and grow and study in God's Word.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our guest today has been Dr. Gary Byers. We're talking about the archaeology of Christmas in this ongoing seasonal continuation of episodes. Dr. Byers, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.